Welcome to the Photography History Podcast by SanalSergi.
Glad to be here for this one.
So I want you to imagine, just for a second, walking down like a really chaotic city street.
Oh yeah, total sensory overload.
Exactly. Picture the cars rushing past, people moving in literally every direction, the light constantly shifting as, clouds move over the sun. It is just this giant mess of unpredictable variables.
Right, just pure chaos.
But now imagine being able to freeze the exact millisecond where all that chaos perfectly aligns into this beautiful, emotionally resonant geometry. A fraction of a second where it just makes sense.
I mean, it sounds like trying to catch lightning in a bottle, honestly.
It really does.
But that pursuit, that perfect, fleeting alignment is really the foundation of modern visual storytelling. We're looking at this massive paradigm shift today where the camera stopped being just a recording device and it became an extension of human consciousness.
Yeah, and that is exactly why today we are diving into the world of Henri Cartier-Bresson. We're doing a deep dive into his legacy because he didn't just take pictures. He fundamentally re-engineered how humanity actually thinks about photography.
He really did.
Because before him, street photography was often just, a game of random luck. You point, you shoot, you cross your fingers and hope. But he transformed it into this disciplined, almost philosophical visual language.
And the mission for our deep dive today is to really figure out the mechanics of that transformation. We're going to unpack how Cartier-Bresson merged the rigid mathematical precision of classical painting with the total wild unpredictability of the streets.
Which seems impossible.
Right. But ultimately, his life's work is just a masterclass in how to truly actually see the world around you.
And I think the best place to start untangling this whole philosophy is to realize that his foundational tool wasn't actually a camera.
No, it wasn't.
He started with a paintbrush, right? He was totally immersed in that 1920s Paris art scene.
Yeah, and his origins there are basically the blueprint for everything he accomplished later.
Right.
So he was a student of André Lotte, who was this very prominent Cubist painter.
Okay, Cubism.
Yeah, and Lotte's studio wasn't just about casually mixing colors or capturing a nice landscape. It was this rigorous, almost punishing training ground in classical composition.
Wow.
Cartier-Bresson had things like the golden ratio, strict perspective, architectural balance. All of that was permanently drilled into his visual cortex. He was taught to look at a canvas as, essentially, a mathematical equation of forms and lines.
Okay, let's unpack this because it can't just sit still, right?
Right. It doesn't run away.
Exactly. You can take 3 weeks to paint a bowl of fruit. You can nudge an apple half an inch to the left, step back, and get that golden ratio absolutely perfect.
Very true.
Out on the street, the fruit bowl falls over, the apples are rolling into traffic, and you have to somehow capture that golden ratio while the apple is literally in midair.
That's the challenge.
So he has to push back a little on the romanticism here, because his core philosophy, what he famously called the decisive moment, is this idea of aligning the eye, the mind, and the heart in a single fraction of a second.
Yes, the classic definition.
But doesn't that suffer from a massive case of survivorship bias?
Walk me through your thinking on that. What do you mean?
Well, we look at his masterpieces today and we think, it's pure genius that he saw the perfect geometry. But realistically, doesn't a street photographer just shoot 1,000 photos, like a machine gun, and then pick the one lucky shot that happens to look like good math?
The machine gun theory.
Yeah. Like if you take enough photos of a busy intersection, eventually one of them will have perfect composition just by pure random accident.
When you look at how we consume and create images today with digital bursts and iPhones, that is a very logical assumption.
Right. It just makes sense.
But the physical evidence from his archives actually completely dismantles that machine gun theory.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah. When you look at Cartier-Bresson's contact sheets, which are the direct prints of his negative strips that show every single frame he took in exact sequence, they prove he was an incredibly patient, deliberate hunter.
Oh, wow. So no machine gunning.
Not at all. You don't see him firing off 30 shots of a chaotic street. You see him finding a background, establishing that cubist geometry in his mind, and then just waiting.
Waiting for the apple to fall into the frame, basically.
Exactly. But beyond just his personal patience, we have to talk about the economic reality of the 1930s. Film was expensive.
Oh, true.
You literally couldn't afford to shoot 30 frames of a puddle hoping one looked good. Every single click of the shutter cost money.
So every shot had to count.
Right. And this specific type of patience, this ability to hunt for the decisive moment without just wasting rolls of film, was only made physically possible by a massive technological leap at the time.
The Leica camera.
Yes, the 1930s Leica.
Because older cameras were those huge, cumbersome wooden boxes, right?
Mhm.
You had to, like, look down into a viewfinder at your waist, and usually the image you saw was actually reversed.
Yeah, they were practically pieces of furniture. I mean, you had to set them up on a tripod, look down into the ground glass under a dark cloth, and physically calculate the exposure.
Which takes forever.
By the time you were ready to take the picture, whatever spontaneous human moment was happening had completely vanished.
Right, I always think it's kind of like someone shoving a massive iPad right in your face today and yelling at you to act natural.
That is the perfect analogy, yes.
Like, the second people see a cumbersome device, they freeze. They put on a fake smile. They stiffen up. The reality of the moment just dies instantly.
Exactly. And the Leica completely changed that physical relationship between the photographer and the world. It was small enough to fit in a coat pocket, it was virtually silent, and critically, it utilized a rangefinder focusing system.
Okay, let's break down why a rangefinder actually matters, because that's a technical term that gets thrown around a lot by photo nerds. How does it actually change the way a photographer sees?
So in a traditional single-lens reflex camera, an SLR, you look directly through the lens itself.
Right.
When you press the shutter, a physical mirror flips up so the light hits the film, taking the picture, but that temporarily blacks out your vision.
Oh, because the mirror moves.
Yes, you actually go entirely blind for the exact fraction of a second that you capture the image.
That's wild to think about.
But a rangefinder is completely different. You look through a separate little window on the top corner of the camera.
So you're not actually looking through the lens itself.
No, you're not. And because of that, you can keep both eyes open.
Oh, I see.
One eye looks through the viewfinder, seeing the little framing lines, while your other eye is literally watching the rest of the street.
So you can see outside the frame.
Exactly. You can literally see a person walking towards your frame before they even enter it. And you don't go blind when the shutter clicks.
That's huge.
The camera just becomes a seamless extension of your own vision. It allowed Cartier-Bresson to basically become a ghost in the streets of Paris. He could move through these crowds silently, anticipating the action, because people simply didn't notice him or register him as a threat.
Okay, so we have this ghost wandering the streets with a tiny, silent camera, a brain hardwired for cubist geometry, and an eye for the surreal.
The perfect storm.
Yeah, but how does that actually translate into an image? Let's look at a photo from 1932, Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare in Paris.
Oh, an absolute classic.
It's a masterclass in this exact tension we're talking about. So, for you listening, we are looking at a flooded, makeshift, kind of industrial area behind a train station. The ground is just this massive puddle acting like a perfect glassy mirror.
And the geometry of the background is already setting the stage. You have a ladder lying flat in the water, which creates these distinct horizontal lines, and then you have the circular ripples forming in the puddle.
And right in the dead center of the frame, a man in a dark suit is just frozen in midair. He is leaping forward to cross the water. His front heel is just a millimeter from breaking the water's surface, and his entire leap is reflected perfectly in the puddle right beneath him.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of how he actually got this shot. Cartier-Bresson didn't just stumble upon this man jumping and casually snap it as he walked by.
He didn't?
No. He found the flooded area, he recognized the geometric potential of that ladder and the reflections in the water, but he was actually shooting through a very narrow gap in a wooden fence.
Wait, so he couldn't even really see the whole scene clearly?
Barely. His field of vision was incredibly restricted.
He's literally looking through a crack in a fence, waiting for the exact right subject to enter a stage he can barely see. That is insane.
And think about the timing. If he presses that quiet Leica shutter a fraction of a second later, the man's heel hits the water. Exactly. The mirror reflection shatters, the tension of the leap is resolved, and the magic of the image completely dies. It just becomes a really mundane photo of a man splashing in a dirty puddle.
But by capturing that suspension, he captures the geometry and the kinetic speed simultaneously.
Yes.
It's just the ultimate visual tension.
Yes.
And, he does something similar, but with an even greater emphasis on kinetic speed in a photo called Hyères, which is also from 1932.
Ah, yeah. This one is perhaps the purest example of his architectural eye.
Let's describe it.
So the perspective in Hyères is looking down a spiraling stone staircase. And the stonework is incredibly harsh. It's this static, heavy, curved spiral that dominates almost the entire composition.
Feels very rigid.
Yeah, it looks like an abstract graphic design, almost oppressive in its stillness.
Right, it's just the beautiful but kind of heavy study of a staircase
Yeah.
until you look at the very bottom of the frame.
Yep.
Because down there, in a tiny gap revealing the street below, a blurry bicyclist is just zooming past.
And that blur is the crucial element.
It's literally like setting a trap.
It really is.
You find the perfect architectural stage, this rigid, unmoving spiral of stone. And then you just wait in the shadows for life to accidentally wander onto it and deliver the punchline.
That's a great way to put it.
Because the pure kinetic speed of that cyclist completely breaks that cold geometry. If the cyclist isn't there, it's just a sterile architectural study.
Yeah.
If the cyclist is a second too early or a second too late, he's totally out of the frame.
And that spontaneous intersection of human energy with rigid architectural form, that is the decisive moment in its absolute purest state. It proves that life isn't static, but for maybe a thousandth of a second, it can be perfectly balanced.
Right. But, pure geometry, even when you add a speeding bicycle, can feel a little bit cold sometimes, like a bit too mathematical.
It can, yeah.
But Cartier-Bresson wasn't just a mathematician of light. He had this really profound empathy for his subjects, and he constantly injected raw human emotion into these perfect shapes.
Oh, absolutely. And to really understand how he layered that empathy over the geometry, we have to look at his 1933 photograph taken in Seville, Spain.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So this is pre-Civil War Spain. It's a period of immense political instability, deep poverty, and this looming threat of violence. And Cartier-Bresson frames the shot so that a crumbling, white, ruined wall completely dominates the foreground.
It literally looks like a war zone, like the aftermath of a bomb or an explosion.
But there is a massive, jagged hole in this wall, and it's almost acting like a theater curtain framing a stage.
Right.
And through that jagged hole, you see these children. And they are running, playing, and laughing right in the middle of all this rubble.
And the contrast there is just jarring.
Yeah.
You have this harsh, destructive, totally static environment of decay right in your face in the foreground.
Yeah.
And it literally frames the unstoppable, resilient, joyful energy of youth in the background. Not just a clever framing device. It's a deeply sociological statement.
What's fascinating here is that he's showing us that the environment is entirely broken, but the human spirit inside it is thriving. He uses the geometry of the ruined wall not just for visual balance, but to actually tell a story about resilience.
Which brings to mind an image of his taken much later, in 1954. Rue Mouffetard in Paris.
Oh, the boy with the wine bottle.
Yes. Okay, picture this. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, is walking proudly down a Parisian neighborhood street, coming right toward the camera.
He looks so happy.
He is clutching 2 massive glass wine bottles. I mean, they are almost as big as his torso. And he is grinning like he just won an Olympic gold medal.
He really is.
And right behind him, slightly out of focus, 2 little girls are watching him and just giggling. It's an incredibly joyous image. But I have to ask,
Yeah.
why is this extremely mundane grocery run considered a masterpiece of photographic history? Like, it's literally just a kid picking up wine for his parents.
Well, I think it is elevated to a masterpiece precisely because it is so incredibly mundane. Yeah. It proves that Cartier-Bresson didn't need a war or a ruined city or a leaping acrobat to find magic. He found the universal human spirit in just the everyday rhythm of a local neighborhood.
I mean, the lines of the street do draw your eyes right to the boys, so the geometry is definitely still there.
It is, but the geometry is completely secondary to the expression of pure, unadulterated childhood pride on his face. It tells us that the decisive moment isn't just about peak physical action like jumping over a puddle.
Right.
It's about an emotional peak. He recognized that a boring Tuesday afternoon chore could be a monument to childhood if you capture it at the exact second the boy's pride peaks.
Wow. Okay. That actually raises a really intense question, though.
What's that?
If the decisive moment requires this Zen-like patience, waiting by a puddle, setting a trap on a staircase, watching a boy walk down a street, how does that philosophy survive when the world is literally burning? Because Cartier-Bresson eventually transitioned into hardcore photojournalism. How do you apply this meticulous patience to global chaos?
It is an incredibly difficult pivot, and honestly, a lot of photographers fail at it. But his ability to maintain his geometric discipline right in the middle of a crisis is really what cemented his legacy.
Yeah.
He took his Leica into the heart of some of the 20th century's most turbulent events, and his coverage of Mahatma Gandhi's funeral in India in 1948 is just a perfect example of this.
The context there is so heavy.
Right. You have a nation in the grip of unfathomable grief after a shocking assassination.
And, in a crisis like that, human instinct And frankly, the demand of any news editor sitting at a desk in New York or London is to point the lens at the dramatic center.
Give me the action.
Exactly. They want a picture of the body. They want a picture of the funeral pyre. Give me the flames and the drama. But Cartier-Bresson did something entirely counterintuitive.
Again,
He turned his camera around.
he pointed his lens directly at the crowd because he understood a vital principle of storytelling. The factual event, the fire, the body, that only tells you what happened. The reaction of the crowd tells you what it meant.
Oh, that's powerful. So by capturing the individual contorted faces of grief, the hands reaching up, the sheer massive volume of the mourning public, he documented the human toll of the historical event.
The decisive moment here wasn't the lighting of the funeral pyre. It was the peak of collective emotional agony breaking across a stranger's face. He used his deep understanding of form and composition to organize this sea of chaotic, grieving bodies into a coherent, lasting image of national heartbreak.
And he used that exact same technique of organizing chaos later that same year, right?
Yeah.
With the Shanghai Bank Run photograph in China.
Yes, December 1948.
The Chinese Civil War is coming to an end. The nationalist government's currency is completely collapsing.
The claustrophobia of that image is just,
Yeah.
it's terrifying.
It really is. You are looking at a massive, crushing mob of desperate people. They're literally packed shoulder to shoulder, chest to back, physically trying to push their way into a bank to exchange their worthless paper money for gold.
You can feel the physical pressure just looking at the print.
People look like they are literally suffocating. But mechanically speaking, how does he make us feel that suffocation through a photo?
It really comes down to where he positioned himself and his specific lens choice. He shot this from a slightly elevated angle, looking down into this huge sea of fedoras and panicked faces.
So he's above them.
Right, and by shooting from slightly above and using a lens that slightly flattens the perspective, he visually compresses all those bodies together. He eliminates the sky and any open space from the frame completely.
Oh, wow.
So there is no visual escape for the viewer, just as there is no physical escape for the people trapped in that mob.
It doesn't just show an economic panic at a specific bank on a specific day then. It visually captures the total collapse and suffocating uncertainty of an entire society.
Exactly.
The government is falling, the economy is evaporating, and the physical crush of those bodies is just the real-world manifestation of that societal collapse.
But, capturing these profound, deeply human-centric stories leads to a massive, very practical problem in the world of publishing at the time. Oh, dealing with the editors.
Yes, you are out there risking your life, capturing the soul of a dying regime or a grieving nation. How do you stop a magazine editor back in Paris or New York from misusing these deeply empathetic images?
Right, because what stops an editor from cropping out all the nuance or slapping a cheap, sensational, or heavily biased political headline over your art just to sell more magazines?
Before 1947, the harsh reality was absolutely nothing stopped them.
Really?
Yeah. The photographer was treated largely as a blue-collar button pusher. You shot the film, you handed the physical negative to the magazine, and the publication owned the copyright forever.
So if you took a really nuanced photo of a political rally, an editor could just crop out the peaceful crowd, zoom in on one angry guy yelling, and write a caption saying the entire city was rioting. And the photographer had zero say in it.
Exactly. The magazine owned the image and they owned the narrative. But Cartier-Bresson, along with Robert Capa, David Jim Seymour, and George Roger, decided to completely break that system.
Yeah.
In 1947, they founded Magnum Photos, the legendary cooperative. It's so analogous to modern indie musicians fighting to own their master recordings instead of being controlled by massive record labels.
That is a brilliant comparison. It was a totally revolutionary business model. Under Magnum, the photographer, not the publication, retained the copyright and kept the original physical negatives.
That changes everything. By owning their negatives, photographers evolved. They weren't just content providers for a newspaper's political agenda anymore. They became independent, long-form storytellers.
Yep.
If a major magazine wanted Cartier-Bresson's photos of Gandhi's funeral or the Shanghai Bank Run, they had to accept his vision of the story. They couldn't arbitrarily crop his precise geometric compositions.
Magnum basically allowed the philosophy of the decisive moment to remain pure. It protected the integrity of the image from being warped by editorial agendas.
Which is so important for history.
Cartier-Bresson could spend weeks or even months in a country, patiently waiting for those perfect intersections of geometry and humanity, knowing his work would be respected and presented exactly as he intended.
So when we look back at all of this, the Cubist training, The silent Leica, the reflections in the puddles, the crowds, the creation of Magnum. What is the enduring takeaway here?
I think Cartier-Bresson's true legacy isn't just the incredible archive of historical documents he left behind, though those are amazing. It is a manifesto of seeing.
A manifesto of seeing.
Yeah. He taught us that photography isn't about manufacturing a reality or forcefully staging a narrative. It is the art of recognizing the fleeting perfection that already exists within the chaos of life. It's about being present, being incredibly patient, and just honoring the reality of the street.
That leaves us with something really important to think about, because we live in an incredibly different world now. Every single one of us walks around with a smartphone in our pocket.
Oh, constantly.
We have burst mode cameras that can take 100 photos in a single second, which completely eliminates the need for timing. We have artificial intelligence that can instantly, seamlessly erase that ugly fence in the background or perfectly fix the lighting on our face after the fact.
Magic erasers.
Right. With technology making image creation so utterly effortless and editable, are we losing the patience to truly see the world? If we can fix everything in post-production, are we just manufacturing moments instead of actually experiencing them?
It's a scary thought. If the decisive moment can be generated by a microchip and an algorithm, what happens to the eye, the mind, and the heart?
Join us next time as we explore another influential figure in the history of photography.